Historians studying the long-distant past must piece together clues about past civilization from artifacts, artwork, and what documents and journals they can find from the period. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 interesting historical photos and the meanings behind them. Sophia Loren and Jane Mansfield. One of the most iconic pictures of old Hollywood is that of Sophia Loren giving Jane Mansfield a hard side-eye during a dinner party. This infamous picture is considered one of the most well-known photographs of both actresses. It became an instant sensation, following both Loren and Mansfield throughout their careers. In the 1950s, Sophia Loren surged in popularity on the big screen. The Italian actress was a top-tier celebrity in her home country and soon gained fame in the United States. After a few years of gaining notoriety in Europe, the West beckoned her to appear in their films. A party was held in her honor by Paramount Pictures in 1957 to welcome her into Hollywood. They threw a dinner event at Romanov's, a restaurant in Beverly Hills. Loren and Mansfield were seated next to each other at this dinner, resulting in the famous photograph. Jane Mansfield was a rising Hollywood star at this point. She was dubbed as the next blonde bombshell after Marilyn Monroe. Mansfield was especially famous for her scandalous behavior and staged acts in front of paparazzi. At one time, she pretended to break her bathing suit top while in the pool when reporters were nearby so that they would take photos of her topless, and she would land on the front pages of magazines and newspapers. At the dinner party in question, Mansfield wore a backless dress with such a low-cut neckline. Loren later explained that the image of her side-eye is precisely what everyone thought it to be. She was staring at Mansfield's chest, waiting for a wardrobe malfunction with her dress to occur. Loren was not angry or jealous of Mansfield, as seen in other pictures taken that night. She was only concerned that the low top would reveal too much. Although Sophia Loren looks angry in the picture, the 2 actresses had no qualms or arguments with each other. They were quite friendly. Loren regrets the photograph and wishes it did not exist. She hates being associated with it and continuously refuses to sign it, despite many fans pleading. She rarely talks about the event and wishes to leave it behind in the past, especially after Mansfield passed away. Loren harbors no ill feelings toward the blonde, but merely focused on the dress for one photographed moment of the night. Loren and Mansfield might have been friendly and wanted to ignore the photograph, but it immediately went viral and has retained its fame ever since. Even now, it is still considered a marvel and one of Hollywood's most famous photographs. Young Nikola Tesla teaches girl how to swim. A photograph has been circulating the internet for years now. Many people describe it as an interesting picture taken of Nikola Tesla as a swimming instructor on the beach during his younger years. Almost every post on social media platforms captions the photo this way, despite it being wildly incorrect. Although they share many similar features, Tesla and the individual in the picture are not the same person. Nikola Tesla is an incredibly famous name that people all around the world recognize. He was a brilliant inventor and engineer that propelled 20th century technology forward. He was born in 1856 in what is now considered Croatia. He then moved to the United States and passed away in 1943 at the age of 86 in New York. Unfortunately, when he passed away, he was poor and alone, as he was incredibly reclusive and often kept to himself. He did not sell his patents and make a fortune, instead opting to share his knowledge with the general public. Tesla was a Serbian-American electrical engineer and the leading scientist of his time. He contributed dozens of technological breakthroughs such as rotating magnetic fields and alternating current electrical systems. He dabbled in many different areas but was most famous for his studies on electricity. Initially, he wanted to become a poet, as he thoroughly enjoyed reading and writing. However, one day he received a zap by static electricity which completely transformed his life. Despite being only a small shock, it inspired him to study the workings of electricity. His desire to learn about technology and science caused by a tiny incident is what led him to become one of the world's most famous engineers. As one of the most well-known men in the world, Tesla's face is easily recognized. Due to this familiarity, people have incorrectly believed this photograph is of Tesla for many years. The picture in question is from 1898 and features a man lying on the beach across from a young woman. The Museum of the City of New York identified the man as a swimming instructor and the woman as a sunbather. The picture was taken at Midland Beach in Staten Island. The man's resemblance to Tesla is uncanny, due to the dark curly hair, moustache, and similar nose, leading many to assume Tesla also surprisingly found work as a swim coach. Although the features look similar, Nikola Tesla was in his 40s at the time this photograph was taken. He was much older than the young man on the beach, and viewers can easily differentiate him by his ears and hairline. Despite many false claims, Tesla was not a swim instructor. He was already a successful inventor in New York with multiple patents. Despite this not being a photograph of the famous engineer, it is often described as Nikola Tesla teaching a girl to swim. Unfortunately, no one knows the true identity of the man in the picture. Still, it probably is not that terrible to be mistaken for one of the most intelligent men in modern history. We Want Beer protest. One incredibly famous photograph from the 1900s displays a prohibition protest held in New Jersey. It shows a group of men holding picket signs as they march through a street, demanding the repeal of prohibition and the return of alcohol. Prohibition began in the United States in 1920 and lasted for more than a decade until 1933. It was a nationwide ban on the production, transportation, importation, and sale of alcoholic beverages. Many residents despised this ban, primarily immigrants from cultures that heavily consumed alcohol. They all felt that the government should not be able to dictate their alcohol consumption. Women made up the majority of Prohibition movement leaders and formed the Women's Temperance Union in the mid to late 1800s to start fighting alcohol consumption. They demanded the ban to protect themselves from their violent husbands. Women across the country and economic tiers were subjected to domestic abuse at the hands of their drunk husbands, although notably lower and middle-class marriages suffered more abuse. After work, men would go to the pubs together to get drunk, then return home and beat their wives. Prohibitionists campaigned against alcohol to protect women and families. Although prohibition was indeed despised by many Americans and instigated an entire bootlegging industry, it did lower the rates of violence against women. However, the number of gangs and criminal activity increased. Illegal activity soared as people became involved in underground alcohol sales. Some gangsters became incredibly wealthy during this period. Cities no longer had funds from alcohol taxes to support their police departments, so they struggled to contain and mitigate crime. There were more gangs than police officers in many cities. Unemployment due to the Great Depression also added to the stress and made things worse. For years, American citizens had been protesting against the alcohol ban with marches and parades. The famous photograph showcases labor union members marching through Broad Street in Newark, New Jersey. This protest occurred on October 30th, 1931. It had been a decade of prohibition and bootlegging violence, so tensions were high and citizens were frustrated. The working men carried banners and posters that read, "We want beer," a direct and clear message. More than 1,500 men participated in this protest as they marched through the main streets. Over 20 different labor unions took part in this demonstration. Scholars consider this event one of the largest staged protests in the country, with many other similar marches and demonstrations held across the different states. The most famous photograph was taken at night, but the march initially took place in the morning. They managed to protest throughout the entire day, from morning until evening, and gathered quite a crowd of onlookers. They were increasingly dissatisfied with the ban and wanted it revoked. This protest was only one of many that occurred during the decade-long ban. Another famous parade occurred the following year in New York, where almost 100,000 people joined in to ask the mayor to repeal the ban. They carried signs, waved flags, and even made floats. While both were impactful protests, it still took another year until the government finally lifted prohibition and permitted alcohol again. But what do you make of these interesting historical photographs and the meaning behind them? Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments section below and help us by growing this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.